How's it going, everybody? You may have heard in the news, they've been talking about this for a while, social media manipulation, fake news, bots, ads on social platforms, misinformation, propaganda, that they're trying to disrupt democratic elections. And I can say that this is all true, because the United States has been doing it for at least 6 years, probably longer. But there's an article in The Guardian that talks about how the US has been buying sock puppets, bots, to manipulate people around the world, sending out pro-American propaganda. This article in The Guardian is over 6 years old. So I don't quite understand why everyone seems to be acting like what we're hearing now on CNN and the mainstream media about Russian propaganda and social media manipulation is at all surprising. Not only that, they're acting like we're being slighted when in reality, we've known the US has been doing literally the same thing for years. I mean, it was revealed that the US was doing this long before Russia was doing this. In fact, I don't know, to make things a little bit funny, in the Guardian article, it actually says the discovery that the US military is developing false online personalities known to users of social media as sock puppets could also encourage other governments, private companies, and non-government organizations to do the same. So if we're at least looking at the timeline of when this news was reported to what's happening now, you could reasonably argue that everything we're hearing about from Russian propaganda, ad buying, and all that stuff is simply them following suit. That we knew the US was doing this and they were inspired and took up the same practice and are now engaging in the same behaviors. But here's the big breaking news update. We're learning a little bit about the Facebook ads that were bought by the Russians, the Russian troll house, whatever it is. So there were many ads bought based in Russia. Now, Facebook didn't publicly release that it was bought by the troll house, but it has been reported by the New York Times and some other outlets that this is the Russian troll house linked to the Russian government buying these ads. One of these ads was supporting Black Lives Matter and was targeting Baltimore and Ferguson. According to the news, it was intended to support Black Lives Matter, but also kind of portray them as a threat. There's a lot of ways you could imagine that could be. You know, if the ad itself was pro-Black Lives Matter, but said take to the streets and get violent or something, that could be seen as making it look like a threat while still supporting it. Regardless of that, this narrative about Russia supporting Donald Trump seems to be kind of moving away as we learn about the kind of ads and the kind of actions being taken in this Russian propaganda campaign. Now I'm going to stop right here and say, if you were to ask me, is the Russian government trying to interfere with US public opinion? Well, yes, of course. Like I said, the United States does the exact same thing. In fact, most countries are probably doing that. And sometimes it's ridiculously overt. Countries might just buy an advertisement saying, hey, we're great. And then you have the more subversive, where they make fake accounts on social media to try and push a narrative to make you believe something about their country or what this country is doing. But when we talk about Russian propaganda, so many people in this Russia sphere wanted to make the story about how Donald Trump's people, about how people who oppose Antifa, how all of this is the Russians trying to upset the natural order in the US. But the reality is, at least what we're learning now, that some of these ads were pro-Black Lives Matter. And I've talked about this before, but take a look at Russia Today. Russia Today doesn't hire pro-Trump personalities. Sputnik doesn't hire pro-Trump personalities. They hire far-left activists. If we want to believe that Russia is engaging in social media manipulation, we have to realize that it is very heavily targeting the left. People like Abby Martin, a former host of RT. People like Lee Camp, a current host of RT. These people hold far-left positions. And the argument has been made that Russia Today is simply trying to find its place in the market. But if we are going to go on this premise that Russian propaganda, which includes RT and Sputnik, is trying to divide the American population, then you have to realize the Russian propaganda is far left propaganda. The Russian propaganda is not against Antifa. It encourages, to an extent, this kind of far left ideology. Which leads me to the next strange and kind of just depressing point of this whole Russia story. A troll account on Twitter called Boston Antifa, or Antifa Boston, recently tweeted from the location Vladivostok in Russia, okay? And certainly people in the Russia sphere on the left started having a panic attack saying, oh my God, they accidentally left location services on, revealing that this fake Antifa account, this account that hates Antifa, was actually based in Russia. But the reality is the users of this fake account were doxxed a long time ago, meaning we know their identities, and they're based in Oregon. It is extremely easy to spoof your location on Twitter. You can download an app on Android that you just drop a pin, and that will appear in your Twitter or photographs, wherever, as your location. I personally believe that the trolls over at Boston Antifa used a GPS spoofer, which took them no less than 10 seconds to get, to make it look like they were in Russia, to troll the left and the Russia sphere conspiracy theorists. Because sure enough, now we're seeing on the front page of Reddit, oh my God, Boston Antifa was actually based in Russia the whole time. I assure you that if there are fake sock puppet accounts being operated by the Russians, it is not in Russia for the most part. And if it is, they're using proxies. We can't have this opinion that Russia is sophisticated enough to enact this election-damaging PSYOPs campaign against the American people, but then at the same time believe that they're stupid enough to turn on location services or not have some kind of security protocol for when and how they post. But not only is it unlikely, we know who is operating this troll account. It's like people don't even use Google anymore. Which leads me to the finer point in why this is all happening. Why do we care so much about Russian propaganda now, and we didn't care about it back when RT launched, when Obama was president? Why is it that everyone is so concerned about this social media manipulation today, but they didn't care when the US was doing the exact same thing 6 years ago? The reason is, dare I say it, tribalism, because it supports a narrative of a particular group. When I talk to people about alternative media, YouTube, and the mainstream media, it seems to me that more often than not, people who are in the know on issues of, say, Russian propaganda and how this stuff has existed for years, how the social media manipulation has existed for years, these are people who are going online and Google searching specific things to try and learn about them. But the people who follow the Russia sphere conspiracy theories are the people who are sitting in front of the mainstream media and just being told what the news is. So there's kind of two communities that are dividing the American population right now. Those that are just saying, hey, what's the news? And those are saying, wow, I heard this, I want to learn more about it. Naturally, there's pros and cons on both sides. A lot of the reporting done by mainstream outlets, they're backed by great resources, and they do get it right very often, I think more often than not. And then people in alternative spaces might stumble upon bad information and just want to believe it because it's close enough to their opinion. But then you have the inverse problem of propaganda can exist on the mainstream media just as much as on the alternative spaces. So the people who are believing this Russia sphere conspiracy stuff, they're watching mainstream media, they're hearing about this, they're seeing these personalities talk about it, and they're not looking up other information. What ends up happening is their concern is hyper-focused on what Russia is currently doing. They believe that Russia is pro-Trump and that all these people are working with the Russian government to try and prop Donald Trump up, make him president, without realizing that, like the news we're seeing today, these Russian ads were targeting, supporting Black Lives Matter. The goal isn't to sway the elections, it's to destabilize. The fighting we're seeing in the streets serves foreign interests very, very well. Seeing American people fighting each other, destabilizing our economy or our government is obviously the intention of American enemies. I'm not saying that's the case, but if you do believe the Russian conspiracy stuff, we know that Reddit, Twitter may be subject to inquiry now in this Russia investigation. If this is all true, then you need to realize that the target isn't just pro-Trump. The target is getting people on the left and the right to fight each other, to destabilize, divide, and conquer. When it comes to issues like this, my stance is pretty much, while the reporting may be true, while it may be Russia trying to manipulate social media, it may be the Russian troll house doing all of this, until I see proof, I'm skeptical. So we know that Facebook said these ads were purchased and they were doing these things, but they never said it was the Russian government and they didn't say it was the Russian troll house. That reporting came from the New York Times. The question then becomes, do you trust the mainstream media? And it's that simple. While I, again, do believe that they are very often correct, they're also wrong often, and in some instances have refused to correct bad stories, which puts us in a bind. We can blame Russia for the divide in America. We can say it's a foreign enemy that's posting fake news and trying to manipulate the public to divide us. But we also need to realize that our own media is responsible to a certain degree for creating this division. When they do stories that repeatedly bash one side, you're going to create division. So we don't need to blame the Russians. We can blame ourselves first. Not only do we do the exact same things with social media manipulation here in the United States, the US government manipulating citizens of foreign countries, our mainstream media serves to divide just as much as the Russian propaganda does. So it really feels like it doesn't even matter if Russia is engaging in this behavior. But maybe now that we're learning that this Russian propaganda was targeting the left and the right, we can start to say, hold on, let's stop fighting with each other and talk to each other, because like we saw this video where Black Lives Matter came to the mother of all rallies, were led up on the stage and spoke, and people clapped and cheered for him. Sure, there were some hecklers, but people cheered for them. Because at the end of the day, we are all Americans, and we're dividing ourselves, and we're being divided, and that's bad. It's a bad thing, right? Let's stop fighting, stop hitting each other, and start talking, because we see what happens when people talk. We see what happens when Black Lives Matter goes up on stage and speaks. People are cool with it. We all start to realize that, hey, you know what? We believe in a lot of the same things, and we should work together to improve the things we care about and try and solve the problems where we disagree. How can we compromise? How can we make the world a better place? So let me know what you think. Comment below. We're talking about Russian propaganda. As you're watching this video, I am going to Barcelona to learn about an actual revolution. Some people are saying that Catalonia is very similar to Brexit. So this should be interesting to see how they feel about the European Union and Catalonia, how they feel about Brexit, and what's going to happen on October 1st. So stay tuned. Breaking news, periodic live streams. You can follow me on Twitter at Timcast. If you want to support my work, make sure you go to timcast.com/donate. Give whatever you'd like, give nothing at all. My videos are always free and available every day at 4 p.m. Stay tuned, and I will see you tomorrow.